It was supposed to be temporary, just a few weeks, maybe a month, Anna had told me. Her younger sister, Lyla, was going through a rough time, and she needed somewhere to stay while she got back on her feet. I had no reason to object. Lyla had always been a part of our lives, showing up during the holidays, helping with family gatherings, sharing laughs with us. But having her move in? It was different. When Lyla arrived, dragging her suitcase through the front door, she looked different. Her hair was tied up, but a few strands fell loosely around her face, giving her an effortless charm. She smiled at me as I helped her with her bags, her eyes holding mine a little longer than usual. "Thanks, Matt," she said, her voice warm, her gaze unwavering. "I appreciate you both letting me stay here. I promise it won't be long." "It's no problem," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Anything for family." Anna came over, hugging her sister tightly. "You're welcome as long as you need, Lyla. We'll help you get through this." As I watched them, I felt an inexplicable tension in the room. Lyla looked over Anna's shoulder and met my gaze again, her expression soft but unreadable. I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was nothing. But even as I turned away, I couldn't shake the strange thrill that had crept into my chest. That evening, we had dinner together, sharing stories and laughing over memories from their childhood. Lyla was full of energy, her laughter infectious, her presence filling the room with a warmth that was hard to ignore. I could see Anna was glad to have her sister around, her usual stresses slipping away as she and Lyla caught up. After dinner, as Anna was tidying up, I went to the living room and found Lyla sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, giving me a tired but genuine smile. "Long days?" I asked, sitting across from her. She sighed, nodding. "Yeah, but it's nice to be here. I feel safe." Her words struck a chord, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy mixed with something else, something I couldn't name. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I held back, not wanting to cross any lines. "You're welcome here," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. "Anna and I are glad to help." She looked at me, her gaze intense, as if she was searching for something in my eyes. "Thanks, Matt. I mean it." The moment lingered, stretching out into a silence that was both comfortable and charged. Then Anna's voice called out from the kitchen, and we both looked away, the spell broken. Over the next few days, I found myself noticing Lyla more and more. It was innocent at first, just a glance here, a shared smile there. But as the days turned into a week, those glances grew longer, those smiles more meaningful. There was something unspoken between us, a connection that neither of us acknowledged but both felt. One night, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs to get a glass of water. As I walked into the kitchen, I found Lyla there, standing by the counter, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes tired but alert. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She nodded, looking away. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." I poured myself a glass of water, taking a sip as I leaned against the counter. The silence between us was heavy, filled with something I couldn't quite place. I felt a pull, a strange urge to close the distance between us, but I forced myself to stay where I was. "Things will get better, Lyla," I said quietly. "You'll get through this." She looked at me, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "Thank you, Matt. I don't know what I'd do without you and Anna." Her words felt loaded, carrying a weight that neither of us wanted to address. I wanted to reach out, to offer her more comfort, but I knew it would cross a line. So I gave her a small smile, forcing myself to turn and head back upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the memory of her gaze, the way her words had lingered in the air like a silent plea. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected, an attraction, a desire that was both thrilling and terrifying. The days continued to pass, and Lyla settled into our home, becoming a part of our daily routine. She would help Anna with the chores, sometimes joining me in the garden or watching TV with us in the evenings. Her presence became a comforting constant, and I found myself looking forward to our quiet moments together. One evening, as Anna was out running errands, Lyla and I were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. She was quiet, her gaze fixed on the horizon, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if things could have been different?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" She shrugged, giving me a small, wistful smile. "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if my life would be different if I'd made different choices. If I'd been braver, or maybe just luckier." Her vulnerability caught me off guard, and I felt a surge of empathy mixed with that same forbidden thrill. I reached out, my hand resting on hers, a small gesture of comfort. "You're stronger than you think, Lyla," I murmured, my voice filled with sincerity. "And you'll get through this. We're here for you." She looked down at our hands, her gaze lingering on the connection, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, an unspoken longing, a need that mirrored my own. The moment felt charged, filled with possibilities and dangers that neither of us wanted to face. Before either of us could say anything, Anna's car pulled into the driveway, and we quickly pulled our hands apart, the spell broken. I stood up, my heart pounding, the reality of our connection settling over me like a cold weight. As the days went on, the tension between Lyla and me grew stronger, more intense. Every glance, every touch felt loaded, filled with an unspoken promise that neither of us dared to acknowledge. I knew it was wrong, that I was playing with fire, but the thrill, the excitement of our secret connection, was too tempting to resist. One evening, while Anna was in the shower, Lyla and I found ourselves alone in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, but her attention seemed elsewhere. I sat down beside her, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. "Matt," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I should be here." Her words sent a jolt through me, and I looked at her, seeing the same conflict in her eyes that mirrored my own. "What do you mean?" She glanced away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I don't want to cause any trouble. You and Anna, you have something real. I don't want to come between that." Her words were a painful reminder of the line we were about to cross, the risk we were taking. But as I looked at her, felt the pull between us, I knew that stopping was no longer an option. "You're not causing trouble, Lyla," I murmured, my hand reaching for hers, a silent promise in my touch. "You're family, and we're here for you." She looked at me, her gaze filled with a mixture of longing and fear, and I felt the weight of our secret settle over me. We were playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy everything, but the thrill of it, the forbidden nature of our connection, was too strong to ignore. In the days that followed, I found myself unable to escape the pull I felt toward Lyla. Our moments together were filled with a charged silence, a tension that grew stronger with every passing day. I tried to distance myself, to focus on my life with Anna, but no matter how hard I tried, I kept coming back to Lyla. Her quiet smile, the way her gaze would linger just a little too long, as if she felt the same forbidden thrill. One evening, as Anna was finishing up some work in her office, I found myself alone with Lyla in the kitchen. She was standing by the counter, pouring herself a glass of water, and when she saw me, a small smile played on her lips. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked softly, glancing over at me. I shook my head, moving to the sink to pour myself a glass. "Just restless, I guess." She watched me, her gaze lingering, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavy, filled with something neither of us could deny. I felt a pull, a strange urge to close the distance between us, but I forced myself to stay where I was. "It's hard sometimes," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Being here, so close to what I want, but knowing it's out of reach." Her words hit me like a wave, a subtle but unmistakable confession that mirrored my own feelings. I looked at her, seeing the same conflict in her eyes, the same desire mixed with fear. We both knew this was wrong, that we were playing with fire, but the pull between us was too strong to ignore. "Lyla," I began, my voice trembling. "We can't, this is dangerous." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know, but I can't help it." Her honesty struck me, and before I could stop myself, I reached out, my hand covering hers in a gesture of comfort that quickly became something more. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, the distance between us dissolved. I leaned in, my lips brushing against hers in a soft, tentative kiss, the thrill of it filling me with both excitement and dread. We pulled back, both of us breathing heavily, the weight of what we had done settling over us. But even as the guilt crept in, I knew that this was just the beginning, that I couldn't let her go. After that night, things between Lyla and me became more intense. We were careful, stealing glances and secret touches only when Anna wasn't around, but the thrill of our connection was addictive. Each moment with her felt like a secret world, a place where the rules didn't apply, and I found myself longing for those stolen moments more and more. One afternoon, while Anna was out shopping, I found Lyla in the living room, reading a book. She looked up as I entered, her gaze softening as she saw me. "Hey," she said, her voice warm. I sat down beside her, my heart pounding as I felt the familiar pull. "Hey." We sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us thickening. She glanced at the door, then back at me, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Anna's not here, is she?" I shook my head, feeling a thrill course through me. "No, just us." Her lips curved into a small smile, and before I knew it, I was leaning in, my hand finding hers as our lips met in a kiss that was both desperate and tender. It was wrong, so deeply wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. She was right there, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. The more time I spent with Lyla, the more I felt myself slipping away from the life I had built with Anna. Lyla had become my obsession, a secret I carried with me every moment of every day. Each touch, each glance felt like a forbidden thrill, a reminder of the line we had crossed and the risk we were taking. One evening, as Anna was showering, Lyla and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen once again. She was standing by the counter, her hair damp from her own shower, and the sight of her made my heart race. "Matt," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if we can keep doing this." I stepped closer, unable to resist the pull between us. "I don't want to stop, Lyla." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and longing. "But what if Anna finds out? We're hurting her." Her words hit me hard, a painful reminder of the line we were crossing. But even as the guilt gnawed at me, I couldn't pull away. The connection between us was too strong, too addictive. "I know," I murmured, my hand reaching for hers. "But I can't let you go." She looked down at our intertwined hands, her breath shaky, and I felt the weight of our secret pressing down on me. We were playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy everything, but the thrill of it was too powerful to resist. In the days that followed, I could feel Anna's gaze on me more often, her questions more pointed, her smiles tinged with something I couldn't quite place. She was starting to notice things, how I would avoid her questions, the way I seemed distant, the way Lyla and I would fall silent whenever she entered the room. One evening, as we were all sitting in the living room, Anna looked between Lyla and me, her brow furrowing slightly. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone casual, but her gaze sharp. I forced a smile, nodding. "Of course. Just tired, I guess." Lyla looked away, her expression tense, and I could see the doubt flicker in Anna's eyes. She wasn't convinced, and I knew that we were running out of time, that our secret was teetering on the edge of discovery. After Anna went to bed that night, I stayed up, pacing the kitchen, my mind racing. The thrill of my connection with Lyla had turned into a constant, suffocating fear, a reminder that I was living on borrowed time. Lyla found me in the kitchen, her expression worried. "Matt, are you okay?" I looked at her, feeling a surge of frustration and guilt. "No, Lyla, I don't think I am." She stepped closer, her hand resting on my arm. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." "Anna, she's starting to notice." Her face fell, a mixture of fear and regret flashing in her eyes. "I know. I didn't mean for this to happen." I reached out, pulling her into a tight embrace, the weight of our choices pressing down on me. "Neither did I, Lyla. But now, I don't know how to stop." We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, both of us caught in a web of our own making. I knew that the path we were on could only lead to destruction, but the thrill, the connection between us, was too strong to let go. And as I held her close, I realized that we were past the point of no return. The thrill and tension that had defined my secret moments with Lyla began to take on a darker edge. What had started as an innocent connection had grown into something that filled my thoughts, leaving little room for anything else. But the fear of being discovered grew stronger with every encounter, and the closer we became, the harder it was to hide. One evening, while Anna was busy preparing for a work presentation, Lyla and I found ourselves alone in the living room again. She sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her presence comforting and dangerous all at once. "Matt, I can't keep doing this," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure Anna wasn't nearby. "It feels like we're playing with fire." I reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I know, but I don't want to stop. I don't know how to stop." She looked at me, her expression filled with a mixture of longing and guilt. Maybe it would be better if I left." The thought of her leaving sent a surge of panic through me, and I shook my head. "Don't go, Lyla. I need you here. We'll be careful. Anna doesn't have to know." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to our intertwined hands. "But what if she does find out, Matt? What then?" Her words hung in the air, a grim reminder of the path we were on. We were balancing on the edge, teetering between desire and destruction, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. In the days that followed, Anna's suspicion grew more palpable. I could feel her watching me, her questions becoming sharper, her tone more probing. She seemed to sense the distance between us, the way I would drift off when Lyla was around, the way I hesitated when she asked about my day. One evening, as we were having dinner, Anna set down her fork, looking between Lyla and me with a hint of tension in her gaze. "Is there something going on between you two?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with suspicion. The question caught me off guard, and I forced a laugh, trying to keep my voice steady. "What? Of course not, Anna. Why would you think that?" She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "I don't know. You just seem distant lately. Both of you." Lyla looked down, her face pale, and I could feel the weight of our secret pressing down on us. I tried to brush it off, to reassure Anna, but I could tell that she wasn't convinced. She knew something was wrong, and I knew that we were running out of time. That night, after Anna went to bed, I found myself pacing the kitchen, my mind racing with guilt and frustration. I knew that what we were doing was wrong, that we were risking everything, but the thought of letting Lyla go was unbearable. Lyla found me there, her expression filled with the same fear and longing that haunted me. She stepped closer, her hand resting on my arm, and for a moment, I felt a sense of calm. "Matt, we can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice filled with desperation. "Anna's going to find out. She already suspects something." I looked at her, feeling a surge of regret mixed with desire. "I know, but I don't want to lose you." She reached up, her hand cupping my face, her touch gentle but filled with unspoken emotion. Maybe it's time to make a choice, Matt. For all of us." Her words hit me hard, a reminder of the line we were crossing. I knew that I couldn't keep living like this, caught between two worlds, but the thought of letting Lyla go was too painful to bear. We stood there in silence, wrapped in each other's arms, both of us knowing that our time was running out. And as I held her close, I realized that the choice was no longer just mine to make. In the days that followed, the tension in our house reached a breaking point. Anna was growing increasingly suspicious, her questions more pointed, her gaze lingering on me and Lyla whenever we were in the same room. I knew that she was putting the pieces together, that our secret was teetering on the edge of discovery. One evening, while Anna was out with friends, Lyla and I were alone again. She was sitting on the couch, her gaze distant, her expression filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. "Matt," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to keep hurting her. She doesn't deserve this." I sat beside her, reaching for her hand. "I know, but I can't let you go." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Maybe it would be better if I left. For all of us, the thought of her leaving, of losing her, was too painful to bear. I pulled her close, holding her tightly, my heart racing as I felt the weight of our choices pressing down on me. "I don't want you to go, Lyla," I whispered, my voice filled with desperation. "I can't lose you." She looked up at me, her gaze filled with a mixture of longing and regret, and in that moment, I knew that we were past the point of no return. The choice had been made, and there was no turning back. Later that night, as Anna was getting ready for bed, she found something, a text message on my phone from Lyla, a message that was too intimate to be innocent. I had been careless, too caught up in the thrill to notice the risk, and now, everything was about to unravel. She confronted me, her eyes filled with hurt and betrayal, her voice shaking as she demanded an explanation. I tried to deny it, to brush it off, but the evidence was there, undeniable. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "With my sister, Matt? How could you do this to me?" The silence that followed was suffocating, filled with the weight of our choices, the pain of betrayal. I looked at Lyla, seeing the same regret and guilt in her eyes, and I knew that we had crossed a line that could never be undone. "Anna, I'm sorry," I murmured, my voice choked with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you." She looked at me, her face twisted with anger and pain. "You didn't just hurt me, Matt. You destroyed everything." The finality of her words hit me like a blow, and I knew that everything I had taken for granted, everything I had built with Anna, was gone. Lyla and I exchanged a glance, both of us filled with regret, but it was too late. We had made our choice, and now we had to live with the consequences. After that night, everything changed. The house that had once been a place of comfort now felt like a prison, each room haunted by the weight of betrayal. Anna's silence was worse than any words she could have spoken. She moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes distant, her expression a mix of hurt and anger that made it clear she was done trying to understand, done trying to forgive. I tried to talk to her, to explain, but every attempt was met with cold indifference or quiet fury. There was no going back, no undoing the damage we had caused. The reality of what I had done weighed on me like a stone, and I knew that I had no one to blame but myself. As for Lyla, she retreated into her own shell, her presence a constant reminder of the line we had crossed. She barely looked at me, her gaze filled with a guilt that mirrored my own, and I knew that whatever connection we had once shared was gone, tainted by the pain we had caused. A few days later, Anna called me into the kitchen, her expression unreadable. She looked tired, worn down by the weight of our betrayal, but there was a hardness in her gaze that made it clear she had made up her mind. "I can't do this, Matt," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with pain. "I can't look at you, can't trust you, and I certainly can't stay married to you." Her words hit me like a blow, each one a reminder of the life I had thrown away, the love I had taken for granted. I wanted to beg her to stay, to give me a chance to make things right, but I knew that it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. "I understand," I murmured, my voice barely more than a whisper. I'm so sorry, Anna." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and anger. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Matt. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the empty kitchen, the weight of her words settling over me like a shroud. I knew that I had lost her, that whatever future we had once dreamed of was gone, replaced by a silence that was as final as it was devastating. Later that day, I found Lyla packing her bags, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She looked at me as I entered the room, her expression filled with regret and guilt. "I'm leaving, Matt," she said quietly, her voice trembling. This was a mistake. I never should have come here." I nodded, feeling a surge of guilt and sadness. "I know. I'm sorry, Lyla. For everything." She looked away, her gaze distant. I thought I could find comfort here. But all I did was ruin everything." We stood in silence, both of us trapped by the weight of our choices, and I knew that this was the end. Whatever connection we had once shared had been poisoned by our actions, leaving nothing but regret in its wake. As she picked up her bags and walked out of the house, I felt a hollow ache settle over me, a reminder of the life I had destroyed, the trust one had broken. And as the door closed behind her, I knew that I was truly alone. The days that followed were a blur of guilt and regret. I moved into a small apartment across town, leaving behind the home that had once been filled with love and laughter. Anna refused to speak to me, cutting off all contact, and I knew that I had no right to ask for forgiveness. I had betrayed her in the worst possible way, and there was no way to make it right. The silence of my new life was suffocating, filled with memories of what I had lost and the choices that had led me here. I found myself replaying every moment, every decision, wondering how things had gone so wrong, how I had let myself fall so far. As for Lyla, she disappeared from my life as quickly as she had entered it. I heard through mutual friends that she had moved back to her hometown, trying to piece her life back together, and I knew that I would likely never see her again. She was a ghost from my past, a painful reminder of the line I had crossed and the life I had thrown away. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on, to build a new life from the ruins of my mistakes. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the weight of my choices, the guilt that haunted me at every turn. I found myself staring at the empty walls of my apartment, lost in memories of a life that could have been, a future that would never come to pass. I knew that I had only myself to blame, that I had made my choices and now had to live with the consequences. But the regret, the pain of knowing what I had lost, was a constant reminder of the life I had thrown away, the love I had taken for granted. And as the days turned into months, I realized that I would carry the weight of that choice for the rest of my life, a silent punishment for the betrayal that had shattered everything.